Right, first off, don't worry, this is not going to be on this video for very long. Now, this car's actually been quite a good car. They're known to be a real pig to work on, but I bought this a number of years ago, like 11 years ago, 120,000 miles, and it's now done 220,000 miles, and it is a pig to work on, but it hardly ever goes wrong. So in actual fact, it is an actually pretty good car. But there's no getting over the fact that it is, how can I put this? Not exactly an 8 or a 10 when it comes to looks. In fact, it's like kind of way down there, like way down there. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that my neighbours should be thanking me a lot because their house price values are just about to go up now that we're finally getting rid of this car. They're also going to benefit from the fact that every day when they drive down that road, they're not going to have to see this anymore. Nevertheless, I'm actually quite sad to see this go. It has been a really solid, good car, and it's done very well for us. But yeah, it's time. You know, the clutch release bearing's gone, the catalytic converter's been messing around for ages, and yeah, it's just at that point. But there you go. Now I better get out of here because they're firing guns over there, tanks over there somewhere. I might get blown up, or they might have a fire around there soon. We get a lot of fires every time they do live firing, and it just sort of starts burning everywhere, and the sky goes this sort of apocalyptic sort of yellow color, and you think, oh God, yeah, better go. So here is the replacement for that car. And when I had to choose a replacement, I was given quite a specific brief. It had to be very similar to the Mercedes A-Class. It had to have 4 doors. It had to have a high-up seated driving position. It had to be practical in all kinds of senses. So I presented the usual suspects such as Citroën DS3s, Fiat 500s, Minis, Mercedes B-Class, and all of them were seen to be a little bit too big or a little bit too small. So in sort of desperation, I said, hey, what about this? It's right close to us. We can go have a quick look at it. And for some reason, this fitted that brief. I mean, you could see it's very, very similar to the Mercedes A-Class in many aspects, really, honestly. So what is it? Well, it's a Peugeot RCZ. It's the 200 THP model, which means it's got a nice dinky little turbocharger here, and the little 1.5 litre or 1.6 litre engine, I've forgotten which, makes 200 horsepower. And that, in this sort of size car, makes for quite an exciting, exhilarating drive. You know, it's not massively fast, but 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds or 7.6 seconds is pretty good. It will top out at 146 miles an hour. I'm not quite sure why they always say 146 and not 145. Some of these performance figures always seem quite precise to within a half mile an hour or something. But yeah, it's a really nice looking car. It's a really interesting design. Now, when it was originally presented as a concept car, I think everyone was quite surprised when they said, we're going to put it into production. And when it turned up in the car showrooms, it actually looked very similar to the concept car. You know, normally concept cars come out and they look very, very cool. And then when they're turned into a production example, they've just lost all their charm and they've been squared out, you know, boxed out in some way to meet regulations and also to meet cost savings and things like that. But Peugeot didn't really change this very much at all. I mean, I really love this sort of the glass that just goes all the way from the windscreen, glass panel here, it's all the way through, and this double bubble is really quite cool. You know, the general sort of design of the car feels quite science fiction-y, like that car out of Minority Report that Tom Cruise got sort of the car got built around him and you were thinking, geez, those bolts are coming in a bit close and a bit fast. But yeah, it's got that sort of spacey, sort of like futuristic feel to it. The packaging is a little bit, well, they kept to the concept car design basically. So there are 2 rear seats here. So getting into those rear seats is a bit of a pain. If you open the seat like this, well, you know, I mean, I don't quite know how you would do that. So what you have to do is you have to use the rather cool fancy electric seats and then wait and wait. Yeah, don't use this as a getaway car from a bank robbery, will you? And then you still really don't have an enormous amount of space to get in there, but the seats exist. And that means that they can be used. They can be used for luggage, but they can be used for two small kids with the ISOFIX points just there. You know, it's a fairly nice place, if not the most comfortable looking thing in the world. But yeah, well, let me see if I can get in. Well, I can. I can. Oh, jeez. Yeah, ow. Oops. So it is very, very tight back here. And my head is on this ceiling. The double bubble on the glass here just isn't quite enough. I don't know if I can turn this around and see. So yeah, I mean, I could sit like this, or I can sit like this, you know. I could sit across the seats as well, which would probably work okay. I've put the seat back like this, and I think someone could drive the car, but as you can see, yeah, these seats are not amazing. You won't want to go on a long journey, but it could be done. You know, when you get to that push comes to shove sort of thing, and you need to take someone somewhere and you haven't got much choice, at least the option exists. It might not be great, it might not be comfortable, but and otherwise, you know, I mean, they're nice seats and everything. It's quite cool how they've done these little holders for the seat belts as well, because one of the nice things is you just click that button on the rear, these seats pop forward and the seat belts don't get in the way. One of the interesting things about these seat belts as well is they are 3-point seat belts. But look, you take them down like this, you click that one in there like this. Oh, what the one of the interesting things about these seat belts as well is, look, they are 3-point seat belts. So this one goes down in here like this, and then you take that across to make the 3rd point across to there. Yeah, quite nicely designed, really, if you're on the smaller side. But then to get out, well, you can see I've got a reasonable amount of space to get out. Look at that. Let's see if I get my neck like that, and then I have to turn around like this. And hey, it's not that difficult. Yeah. The boot, on the other hand, is really, really massive. Because they squeeze these seats up, you open that boot and you've got an enormous amount of space, and the rear seats fold forward as well. I kind of think, why didn't they just, when they were moving to production, why didn't they just move this pillar back, you know, 3-4 inches to there, and just give that little bit more space in the rear and take away a little bit from the boot? But, you know, in some ways, if they'd have started doing that, they would have done something else, and then we'd have ended up with a Peugeot 308 or something like that. I don't know. So not too much complaints there from me. So a lot of people at this point will be saying, hey, that's just a cheap version of an Audi TT. And there might be a lot of truth to that, really. I can't really make too much of a comment because I've never driven an Audi TT. I've never even been in one. The only thing I know about an Audi TT is it has the same water pump as a Ferrari Mondeo. That's a good piece of information that might be very useful to someone out there. Probably not. But the fact that it is cheaper than an Audi TT is a really good thing, I think. This car, with 80,000 miles and a full service history and in reasonably good condition, costs £2,600. And I think that's a bit of a bargain. What you have to remember is that here in the UK, we have cheaper cars anyhow. All cars seem to lose their value a lot more than in other countries. Nevertheless, you are talking somewhere between £1,500 and £3,000 for any car that has a reasonable level of mileage, that has a reasonable service history and is reasonable condition. And those cars will typically be boring, they will be slow, and they'll be worth not the price of a packet of crisps at the end, but after another 5-10 years, they'll be worth the scrap value, which is about 180 quid. That's what I got for my Mercedes A-Class a couple of weeks ago. So to find something that's actually quite exciting, is really, really fun to drive, and, you know, a really different looking car for £2,600 that might be a future classic, that seems to be a bit of a bargain in my view. Now, in terms of reviews from journalists, this actually got some quite good reviews when it came out. Even Jeremy Clarkson was nice about this car, very nice about this car. 4 years later, he would test the RCZ R, which was a much more powerful version, but essentially identical. And he was very snotty about that one. It seems that what set him off was the fact that when he got the car, it had squeaky brakes, and that really irritated him. And he even admitted it in the article as well. Yeah, Jeremy Clarkson can be a bit of a diva, or a divo, if you will, at times. He's not quite Mariah Carey sort of level, but he is like approaching an Elton John in that sense. Now, driving this car is fun. In fact, that's what sold it to me so quickly on the test drive. It feels fun, it feels sporty, it feels fast. I have no idea if it is or not, and quite frankly, I don't care. It makes me feel like a racing driver. It's that sort of speed as well, that it feels fast at slow speeds. It feels fast at high speed. So you always feel that sort of sensation of it being a fun experience, something that's going to be enjoyable and good to drive, you know, without necessarily threatening your license, which is a pretty important point, particularly in nowadays Britain with all these blooming speed cameras everywhere. So yeah, I've been really impressed by this sort of just the dynamic feel you get from driving this car. Do it getting around this crossland. I mean, they could have made something pretty and amazing with that steel, and instead they made that. I mean, honestly, it costs the same amount of money to make something ugly as it does to make something pretty. I just don't understand modern car manufacturers. You know, didn't someone, while they were making that car, just suddenly walk in and go, oh, that looks a bit crap, why don't we redesign it? So the cabin inside here just feels really nice. You know, you've got this nice sort of sporty steering wheel that's a little bit on the small side and makes you feel like you're going fast even when you're not, which is a great thing nowadays. It really is. If you can have fun driving the car at slow speeds, that's a real big bonus in my mind. But yeah, all the clocks are nicely organized. You can move the steering wheel because unfortunately at the moment, that's the view I get of the clocks. But obviously I just need to adjust it properly for my sitting position. But the leather work, you know, it's got really nice stitching round here. This is a car that's done 80,000 miles and it looks pretty much fresh. You know, give it a little bit of a clean, a little bit of a feed on the leather, and I'm sure it will come back to, you know, something that looks really in new condition. So yeah, I'm really satisfied with how this cabin looks. Actually, it's really nice. Obviously the infotainment system, it's a bit old, but that's exactly what I want in many respects. This has got Bluetooth in. I can control my iPhone music straight through on Bluetooth. It will come up there and I can adjust the songs there, which is just what I want, something that's easy to use. I've got proper air conditioning buttons here, not some sort of stupid thing like these modern cars with these LED screens. I had to drive a Peugeot 208 for work the other day, and I was halfway around the M25 and I realized my toes were absolutely freezing cold. It felt like I was getting frostbite, and it was the air conditioning was coming straight out on them. So I went into the LED screen and I was trying to adjust it. I just could not figure out how to change the setting. It was so frustrating. In the end, I just opened the windows and I turned the air conditioning off on the hottest day of the year. They had some weird menu in there and it was like you had to press another button to stop it from going through there. I mean, just so unintuitive. It was insane. I don't understand what's wrong with modern designers, that they can't just follow the established norms and procedures that everyone knows. Why they have to mix it up. It just frustrates everyone. And creates a hazard because you're driving and you're supposed to be driving and instead you're faffing around with a screen. So give me this old style interior any day of the week. I particularly like this clock, by the way. It just looks a bit Maserati-ish, and it's just a nice thing to have in the centre. Now, in terms of reliability issues on these cars, I must confess I did not do hardly any research on the car when I went to buy it. In actual fact, you know, I ended up in a car park just before trying to look through my iPad, trying to read up on forums, which is always the worst thing to do, because if you go on the internet saying Peugeot RCZ or any car and problems, you will get a whole ton of people going on and on about problems. Why? Because obviously you only go on a forum and talk about a problem if you have a problem. You don't go on there and say, my car's fantastic, it's absolutely brilliant, and it never goes wrong at all. Bye-bye. You know, so you have to be a little bit careful researching cars on the internet. Otherwise, you'll end up with these sort of very narrow-minded views like we have about the Maserati Gran Turismo, where everyone assumes that they just break and they fall apart, which is absolutely not true. A couple of the aspects I will quickly mention about this car, though, that, you know, are potential gotchas, which I didn't know about when I went to look at it, because it was literally a snap decision to go and look at it. But the tyres on this are expensive. They're 235 40x19s, and, you know, a set is typically 500 to 800 pounds. We paid 550 for these Pirelli Power G ones. It came with Michelin Sport Pilot 4s on it, which were really nice and very grippy, and everyone says they're fantastic. But at the time, they were looking at around about 750 to 800 quid for 4. I just can't go to that sort of level of expenditure. But these Pirellis seem to be okay. They seem to, you know, I haven't really noticed a huge amount of difference. And sometimes I wonder just how much difference there is between the various tyres and how much it's like in the old head there to a degree. Another big gotcha on this car, though, is timing chains. Now, I'm not so fussed about this because, you know, cam belts are difficult to change. The Volvo's cam belt is an absolute pain. A Peugeot 406 cam belt can be a right nightmare, particularly in the 20-valve version 406 Coupe that I had years ago. So, you know, I'm used to the concept of every 60,000 miles having a job that I don't particularly enjoy. The timing chains on these can live from something around about 60,000 miles if you haven't looked after the car and haven't done regular oil changes, or either you've done the Peugeot recommended oil changes at 15,000 or whatever miles it is, which is just far, far, far too long a period to leave the oil, you know, sat in there for. But they can also, the timing chains can last up to like 120,000 miles or 140,000 miles. So it's one of those things that might be a problem. And they don't necessarily give out like a cam belt does. I mean, a cam belt can snap and ruin your engine in, you know, well, milliseconds. These timing chains apparently give you a fair warning. You know, they start rattling, you start throwing codes on the engine, you know, and these are the nice little signs that perhaps you need to go and get the thing changed. As in terms of cost, of course, I think it's about £600–700 if you pay someone, but you know, a timing chain kit for this is about just under £200. So if I have to do the timing chain, and there's no reason to suspect that this timing chain has any issues, by the way, but if it turns out that I do have to do the timing chain, it's about 200 quid, and it's not much more difficult than a cam belt. It's certainly easier than a cam belt, for instance, on a Ferrari Mondeo, which normally means engine out, although you can do it by taking the fuel tank out. Sorry, that's another useless piece of information that most people would never ever need. So I am pretty happy with this car. I mean, it's a really cheap car, it's a fun car to drive, it's nice to look at. There is, however, one problem that remains, and I hesitate to mention it on this video because it's a matter of just aesthetics, and it's only a problem for me because I've made a link between one thing and another thing, and now I just can't get it out of my head. So if you don't want to know what it is, this is a great time to like, subscribe, click on that little notification bell, I really appreciate it, and then switch off the video. If on the other hand you want to find out what's got into my head, well, I like watching nature programs. One of my favourite films is Men in Black 3. And there is a particular scene in there where you're introduced to a certain type of fish that actually exists in the world, and I've seen on nature programs too. It's known as the blobfish, and why did I have to make that association? If I can't get it out my head, there is one fairly easy fix, and that is that the facelift bumper just happens to be completely interchangeable with this, and it removes this section here. All you have to do is change the headlamps. And these headlamps are okay because I've polished them up because they all went UV damage. So I got one of those Holtz repairer kit things and sanded them all down, ready for the new MOT that's due. But yeah, it's not a terrible thing if I change these. So that is the solution to that rather niggling annoyance. I mean, having said that, now I've normalized it in my head, it's kind of like disappeared out the way, and hopefully I can ignore it. Yeah.